All right, welcome, and this is another lesson in web design. Today we're going to be looking at making a three-column layout web page. This is the end result. This is what we're going to have when we're finished. And in this we're going to go over several things we're learning in chapters 6 and 7. We're going to take a look, for example, at putting an image in your header. We're going to take a look at titles and subtitles, but also how to use interesting text shadow effects. This is text. This is not. These are not images. We're going to be taking a look at border radius and how you can make an effect like this round picture right here. We're going to be taking a look at, of course, the three-column layout, including how to make the columns go all the way down and following the height, the automatic height of the of your center or main column there. We're going to be taking a look at block anchors, stuff like this, and how to get that tabbed effect, and a lot more. So let me give you a rundown of what it is we're going to be doing, and then we'll take a look at making wireframes. Let's begin by taking a look at the things that we're going to study in this video. First, we're going to take a look at floats. This is a way to make your columns, your block elements, go side by side. You'll need a clear for the footer, however, to make sure that it doesn't go up behind the top of your columns. We're going to do some positioning. We're going to do a block anchor, which means that we're going to make a div into a link, not just the text. We're going to do pseudo classes like hover. We're going to do border radius for rounded corners. I'm going to show you a special effect with that. We're going to do box and text shadows, again, for some interesting special effects. I'm going to show you how to make a print style sheet so that when you print the web page, it'll still look really good, but in a different way. And then we're going to show how to support structural elements in older browsers that might not recognize what a main or an aside or an article is. So that's a basic rundown of what we're going to study here. Next we have the wireframe. The wireframe is your basic plan for your website. If you don't plan, then it's going to be hard to make sure that everything fits just right. So the first thing you want to do is get a blank piece of paper, draw a rectangle for what your body looks like on the screen, the body of the website, and then add the parts. For example, we'll want the wrapper. In this case, we're doing a design in which we have a set wrapper in the middle, and then the margins on the left and the right will increase or decrease according to how big the window is. Inside the wrapper, we're going to have several parts, the header, then we're going to have the three columns, the nav, the article, and the aside, and then we're going to have the footer. You have to plan these things because you might have a different design each time, and you want to make sure that you know exactly where things are going to be and what their sizes are going to be so that you can make your web page as easily as possible. For example, what if you want the nav and the aside to go like this? Then you've got to have different arrangements. What if you want the header and the footer just to be only above and below the article and both sidebars to go the full size up and down? What if you want only 2 columns? Or what if you want 4 columns? Each of these different designs is going to require different planning, and it's always best to plan it on paper before you sit down and start typing the HTML. Now, one part of this is that you have to decide how wide things are going to be. For example, I've got a page here that I know I'm going to have a 1,000 pixel wide wrapper. So, how do I plan the nav, the article, and the aside in terms of width? Well, I've decided to go 600 pixels for the article, and then 180 and 220 for the nav and the aside. I don't need as much space for the nav because I'm just going to have buttons there, and I need a little more space for the aside because I am going to have text there, and so I need more space to make the text look good. So that's something I want to plan ahead. Now, another problem is the sidebars. Now, normally your nav, article, and aside, these are going to get a height which is based upon what is inside of them. Now, you could decide the height of each one of them beforehand, but this is not very convenient because you might have some articles that are short, some that are long, some asides that have more text than other asides, and If you only have one size for all of them, then some of them are not going to have enough space and others are going to have a lot of blank space at the bottom. So it's always best to let the amount of content to decide the height of the page. But if you do that, then it becomes difficult because the nav and the aside might not reach all the way to the bottom. And many people like to have all 3 columns, or 2 columns if you're making a 2-column display, reach all the way down to the bottom. Now there's a trick for that that I'm going to teach you in this lesson. It's a little bit strange, but it works. And that involves using a wrapper around just the center area. And I'm going to use the main tag for this. I could say it's wrapper 2 or center wrapper or something like that, but I thought main is a good tag to use here because the nav, the article, and the aside are the main content for this site. So I'm going to use main to put these together. Now we're going to come back to this when we're making the HTML and the CSS, and I'll show you the trick so that you can keep all 3 columns always the same height. Now, for each one, you also want to think about how much space is going to be taken up by things like padding or margins or borders. For example, the article in my site is going to have padding of 20 pixels on each side. I've set 600 pixels aside for the whole article space. That means that I have to make the article itself 560 and then add 20 pixels on each side for the padding. In a different case, I have an aside on the right-hand side, and the aside is going to be 220 for the total. But here I have not only the 20 pixels of padding on either side, but I also have a 1-pixel border that's going to be on the left. And so I have to account for the border as well. So the 1-pixel border, the 20 pixels padding, 179 pixels for the main aside, and then 20 pixels more for padding, that equals 220. So you've got to calculate these things beforehand so that you can type them in simply when you're doing the code. So let's go to the code and let's start this page. Okay, so I've got myself set up here. I've got my folder for my website right here. I have in the background open a browser window and I've got Komodo Edit. Inside my folder, I've got an images folder, and inside there I have the images that I'm going to be using, including the logo and the picture of me. Notice that the image titles are descriptive and that they are entirely lowercase, including the file name extension. That's something you want to be careful about. So I'm now going to go back up, and so this is what my website looks like so far. I've got an images folder with the images, and now I'm going to create the page. So I'm going to go into Komodo Edit, and I'm going to make a new document. And I'm going to begin with the very basics because many people in the class, I noticed, have been making some mistakes here. I want to make sure that everybody gets practice, and so we don't make those mistakes again. It's doc type. I've seen people spell this with a Q or a G. It's not dog type, it's doc type. And don't forget to put the HTML in there. That's an important point. Indenting is something that I like to stress because I think it keeps everything clean. There should be an indent only when you're inside another block element. So doc type is not block, it's not containing anything, so let's not indent for that. But HTML is going to be one of those, and we're going to put in the language equals English. So that is holding other tags, so we're going to have an indent there. Every time you have one tag holding other tags, almost every time that is, you should indent. So now we're going to do the head, and inside the head we're going to have, for example, the title, and here we're going to call it a 3-column layout. After the head, I'm going to put my meta tags. The char set, everybody should know by now, but a lot of people are not putting the capital UTF, so try to do that. And this one, and this meta tag for the author, a lot of people are confusing it. You've got to remember this. I know it's a little confusing, but it's name equals author. This is not your name. This is the name of the meta tag. And then the content is going to be what the author is. So content means who is the author, and that's going to be your name. I'm putting in my name right there. Okay? Now, even though Komodo Edit does indent after the meta tag is a void element, so we're not going to indent after that. Let's make a link to the style sheet. Don't forget, relationship is going to be style sheet, and the href. Now, a lot of people are giving crazy names. If you have a reason for having a crazy name, then that's good. But normally, just call it styles.css unless you have a really specific need. Usually, people give it a different name only if you've got multiple style sheets and you need to have different names in order to show how each one is different. So there we go with that. I think that'll probably be okay right now for the head. So let's create the body. Next, let's add the div and the wrapper. So this is going to be div id equals wrapper. There we go. And then inside here, we're going to have the header as usual. Now, inside the header, before I've told you to make the H group, but actually there has been a recent change. Late last year, those who decide the standards decided that H group was no longer necessary. So we're going to follow that, and we're not going to use an H group from now on. My apologies, but instead we're going to go directly to the H1. That's going to be the title. And the H1 is going to be 3-column layout. And then we're also going to have an H2 because normally headers will have a title and a subtitle. This one is going to be It's a Real Blast. Now we could have an image in here as well. We're going to put one in later, but for right now we're going to keep it just at H1 and H2. Now, after the header, as I said, we're going to have the 3 columns, but because of this trick I'm going to teach you, to keep all the columns the same height, we're going to begin by adding a main tag. Main is not automatically supported, so that's why it's not auto-filled in Komodo Edit. Then inside the main, we're going to have the 3 columns, and that's going to begin with the nav. We'll fill that in a little bit later on. Then we're going to have the article. The article is a new one that you haven't seen before. The article is about if you have a website that has maybe blog postings or news articles. These are best put into a structural element called article. And then we're also going to add an aside. An aside is a common name for a column that has some content that is related to the article or the main content area, but it is not the main content itself. So we have the nav, we have the article, and we have the aside. So let's go outside then of the main. So this is after the main, after the 3 columns that are going to be in the middle, and now we're going to add the footer. And the footer will have our copyright notice, so we're going to say the entity, copy, and then we're going to say 2015, and then you can put your name there. There are other ways to do this, but this is what we'll go with right now. Don't forget to add that semicolon at the end of your entities. That may not break it if you leave it out, but it certainly is not a good idea. It'll probably break it on some browsers, but not on others. Okay, so there's our basic structure. Let's go ahead and save this page. And let's see, we're going to put it into our 3 column. I'm going to put it in here. Make sure you've got it in the right place. This is our first page, so we're going to call it the index.html. And so now when we save it, you can see in your folder, you should now have an index. Now we're going to need a style sheet, so let's just get that set up. Remember, it's going to be called styles.css. So let's make a new document here, and let's immediately save it. We're going to save it in the same place. This is going to be styles.css, and we're going to save it there. Now, once it's called .css, Komodo Edit will understand that it's a style sheet and not a web page. So now we've got it all set up, and we're going to move on to making some basic styles. Okay, so you can see that I've loaded the page right here. It's not looking like much, but let's go over here and make some styles. I'm in styles.css, and the first thing I'd like to point out is that there's going to be a certain order I'd like you to follow. You should usually start with a body rule. This is usually a margin of 0 pixels. Now sometimes you'll see whenever there's a 0, you'll see it as just that. That's because any unit, when it's 0, it's the same. But if you don't put the unit, like the px, I think that's kind of a bad habit, and it's kind of hard to break as a beginner. So just to make sure that you put the px or the pt or centimeters or inches where they need to be, I'd like you to put the px all the time if you could. Now another thing we want to do for the body is put in a background, put in a background color, and let's make it a light blue. So let's make it DDEEFF, and there we go. Now the body should go first because that basically is the largest one, and you want to keep your CSS rules in order. You don't want to jump from one to another and have H1 at the top and H3 in the middle and H2 at the bottom. It's kind of confusing and it's hard to find where everything is. So you want to have an order. That should begin with the body. The next should be the wrapper. And then after that should come the header, in this case the main, the nav, the article, the aside, and then the footer. So in other words, your structural elements should come first. After that, then you can have the headers like the H1, H2, H3. Maybe you have a lot of the standard tags next, like P, block quote, and so forth. Maybe links would come after that. Then perhaps special classes and IDs, and each one should be tagged to show with a comment to show what it is for. So let's do that. Let's go in that order. And for the wrapper, we want to have the width be, whoops, not widows, but the width. I bet everybody has made that mistake. Should be 1,000 pixels wide, and we want to center this. So let's give it a margin. Now here I'm going to give it actually a little bit different margin than usual. First of all, I want it to be 0 pixels at the top because I would like it to be flush at the top of the page. We want the left and right to be auto, so we'll do that. But then the last one, I'm going to make that 50 pixels. And the reason why I'm making it 50 pixels is because at the bottom of every page, I'd like there, after the end of all the content in the footer, I'd like there to be some extra space at the bottom. Because otherwise the wrapper blends in with the bottom of the window and it's not clear that you've reached the end, and people might keep trying to scroll after that. So putting a nice margin at the bottom makes it very clear that you've finished your basic document content there. Okay, let's add some padding. Now I'm not adding padding to the left and the right. I'm going to add my left-right padding to each structural element. But here I'd like to add a little bit to the top and the bottom. So let's do 10 pixels at the top and bottom and 0 at the left and right. So now I've got the padding. So now if I save that and we take a look at what that looks like here, you can see that now it's colored and we have a nice wrapper layout right there. Okay, so that is the wrapper. The next thing I'd like to do is something new. You've probably seen this if you've read the book like you're supposed to, but it's something that we have not done in class before, and that is supporting new HTML5 elements in older browsers. For example, the header, let's see, main especially is not really supported very well. Nav, whoops, article, aside, let's add the footer, and just because we're doing it, let's add figure and fig caption. So we notice I'm putting commas in between these. That means all of these each get the style. It's not a fig caption in a figure, in a footer, and in a side. It's not like that. The commas mean that all of these get the equal style. And that style is very simply display block. Now, the reason why we do this is because many older browsers don't recognize the newer HTML5 structural elements. So in order for those browsers to accept them as block elements, we have to say display block. Now, newer browsers already know this, except some might not understand main yet, but still, most of these are understood by browsers as being block elements. But we want to make sure that we're catching the people who are using the old browsers as well. Otherwise, the page could just collapse when it's viewed on an older computer. Next, I'm going to make the basic dimensions for the header. And this is only for the header. So I'm not going to say the width, because the width will automatically be the width of what it is inside, and that's the wrapper. So that has already been set. So if I just leave no width on the header, then it'll automatically be what the wrapper is. Instead, I'm going to say that the height will be 90 pixels. There we go. I am going to give it some padding. And let's see. The padding, I'm not going to put any padding at the top because the wrapper already has that, 10 pixels, top and bottom. I am going to put 20 pixels on the left and the right because I don't want the H1 or the H2 going directly against the edge of the wrapper. And I will put 10 pixels at the bottom, so I'll have a little bit of space there above where it turns into the nav bar and the article and the aside. Okay. Now later on I'll be adding some borders, but not yet. So instead, let's go to the main. Remember, the main is just going to be only a container. Sorry, I keep on putting those angled brackets there. In the main, we're not going to do very much of anything. There's not going to be any size. The size is going to be exactly what the wrapper is. And there's not going to be any coloring or anything like that. But I can use the main for something else. The main is going to contain the nav, the article, and the aside. So if there's something I want for all three of those, but not for the header and not for the footer, then I can put it here. For example, a font family. Now, in this case, I'm going to use a font family from Google Fonts. I haven't added it yet, but I know what it's going to be. So I'm going to make it Railway, and that is a sans serif font. So I'd like that to be the font for all three columns of the main part of the page. But there's one other thing I'm going to do, and this is part of the trick for those columns all maintaining the same size, and that's going to be something called overflow. Now, we studied this before recently. I'm going to hide the overflow because the trick that we're going to use is that we're going to make the padding at the very bottom of our page of each column is going to be really, really, really huge. We're going to have 1,500 pixels of padding, and then we're going to have minus 1,500 pixels of margin. But if we don't hide the overflow, then we're going to get all that visible at the bottom, and that's not going to look good. So if we hide the overflow in the main, that's part of the trick to make sure that all of our columns are the same length. All right, let's go on to what is inside the main. First of all, we've got the nav. So the nav is going to be 179 pixels wide. I should put width there. 179. Now, the reason for 179 is because the whole thing is actually 180, but I want to use a border. I want to use a border to the right of that. I'll explain that later. Now, we will have some padding at the top and some padding at the bottom, but let's just do the padding at the top first. There we go. And let's just have 10 pixels of padding at the top. Why don't we leave it there, and we'll come back to it later. Then we're going to have the, let's see, we're going to have the article. Here we go. And the article, as we saw in the illustration before, is going to have a width of 600, but we need to leave space for 20 pixels of padding on either side. So that's going to be 560 pixels. And then the padding for the article is going to be 10 pixels at the top, which is the same as what we have for the nav. And then it's going to be 20 pixels at the left and the right. And we'll get to the, right now we'll just leave it as 10 pixels at the bottom, but we're going to change that bottom one in just a minute. So this is top, left, right, and bottom, and we're going to change the bottom one very soon. Next, we're going to have an aside. So this is the third column. So the nav is going to be the column on the left, the article is going to be the column in the middle, and the aside is going to be the column on the right. So this one, we're going to make the width 179 pixels. Now, you might think, hey, that's the same side as the nav, but here we're going to add more padding on the left and the right. That's what's going to take up the space. So for the aside, we're going to have padding, and the padding is going to be 10 pixels for the top to match the others. It's going to be 20 pixels on the right and the left. And for right now, again, let's put 10 pixels of padding at the bottom. Actually, it's going to be much more than that when we do that trick to make the columns line up. But for right now, let's just keep it right there. And then after that, we finish the main area. We've got the 3 columns, and we're going to go on to the footer. Okay. And in the footer, now these are going to float. The nav, the article, and the aside, they're all going to float. So why don't we take care of that now? The nav is going to float left, because that's going to be on the left-hand side. The aside is going to float right. That's going to be on the right side. Now, in the textbook, they say that the main content can be in between those, and it doesn't need to be floated, but that's only if you're not using a container. If you're using a container, then you should float it. So we're going to float this one, and we're going to call it float left, so that it'll float right next to the nav. So this will be floating on the left, this will be next to it floating left, and then the aside will be floating right. But there shouldn't be any space left between them because we're calculating the spacing very exactly. At least it will be when we put in 1 pixel of border here and 1 pixel border here. But the footer needs to clear those. So let's say clear both, and so now that'll appear underneath all of those. All right, so what else do we need for the footer? We need the height. Now the height is gonna look pretty small, but that's just because the text is pretty small. The height is going to be 10 pixels. There's going to be some small text, maybe 10-point text in there. We're going to have padding. The padding is going to be 10 pixels at the top and the bottom, and then 20 pixels on the right and the left. Again, we don't need to put a width on this. The width will be automatically set within the wrapper. And then for right now, why don't we just keep it like that? So there we go. Now we've done our main structural points in order from top to bottom. And if I now reload this, it doesn't look very different. There is structure here, but we can't see it. It probably would be better if I gave a little bit of background color to these. So let's add some background colors so we can see them a little bit more clearly. We don't need a background color for the wrapper because all of these are going to have their own color. And so the wrapper will actually be covered up by all of them. So that's just not necessary. The header, let's see. The header will give a background color of white, for right now at least. So let's go sharp FF, FF, FF. If I wanted to, I could have made, as a matter of fact, that's one thing we could do. We could make the wrapper with a white background, and that would just fill in white background for the header and the footer. Well, why don't we do that? Let's put this up here. So now I put the background color in the wrapper, and I'm going to leave the header and the footer clear. So that means that the white background of the wrapper should show through. That saved me a little bit of time. Now I don't have to type separately for the header and the footer. Those can just be clear. But we do want something for the nav. So the nav, let's give this a background color of, let's give it a greenish one. Let's call it background color. and I believe we'll do DD, FFDD. That's kind of a light green. Let's do this in the article as well. Let's give it a background color. And the background color for the article will be more of a pinkish color. Let's give it whoops, forgot the sharp, FFEEDD. If you've observed me in the classroom, you know I sometimes forget my sharps. Let's go to background color for the aside. And the background color for the aside will be more purplish. So let's make it sharp, FFDDFF. Okay, there we go. So now if we take a look at it, it'll be a little bit more distinct. There we go. Now it doesn't look like much because right now there's really nothing in the three columns in the middle, but you can see that there is something there. They're just very, very small. So let's actually try to put something inside those columns, and we'll start with the article. So let's go to a web page, and let's use something called lorem ipsum text. To get there, we're going to go to www.ipsumgenerator.com. I'll have this URL in the instructions. And this is what's called a lorem ipsum generator. Now, what is lorem ipsum? Lorem ipsum is Latin text. The meaning is not important, but it is used very commonly as filler text or sample text. If you're designing a web page and you want to see what the text looks like, but you don't have the text yet, you use lorem ipsum. So we're going to create, let's say, 10 paragraphs. We're going to add the paragraph tags, and we're going to click Generate. This will actually generate text which already has paragraph tags. So all we have to do is select it, and then we have to copy it, and then we can take it into our browser. So I'm going to go into the index here, and I'm going to go into the article section, and I'm going to paste. And there we go. So here is our lorem text. Now this text is not indented correctly, so I'm going to select all of it. There's a trick you can use. If you select text, no matter how much, and then after you've selected it, hit Tab and Tab and Tab again, then it will indent it correctly. And there we go. Now normally I would do this and have the P tags at the top and the bottom, but it's not really necessary right now, especially since we're just going to replace this text later on. But this gives us an idea of what the text is going to look like. So now if we save this and we go over to our page, you'll see that the text has now expanded down, and it pulls the page down with it. Because this footer has a clear on it, that means that it's going to pull everything, including the wrapper, down all the way to the bottom. And when we add more text, it just goes further down. If we take away text, it'll go up. So it's nice and flexible. But you'll notice that our columns at the left and the right are not filling out at the same rate. So that's where our little trick comes in. In order to get those other columns to match up with the main column, what we've got to do is that we've got to add to the bottom and then take away from the bottom. The way that we add to the bottom is with the padding. So we have padding top right here above. So let's put it next to that and give padding to the bottom. Now this padding is going to be 1,500 pixels. That's going to go down from the bottom of the nav all the way down. Now, it's not important that it's exactly 1,500. It could be 1,000, or it could be 2,000, or it could be 5,000. The point is that it should be longer than the longest the page is going to be. So we're going to do that here. We already have padding right here, so I'm going to add 1,500 to the bottom padding for article. We also have padding here, so I'm going to add that there as well. So now all three of them have padding at the bottom. So if I now save this and reload, you'll see that now we've got the padding basically goes all the way down there. So that's longer than the page, and that's good, but we don't want it to we don't want to have all that extra space down at the bottom. So what we're going to do instead is that we're going to add a negative margin. And the negative margin, let's put it above the padding. Let's say margin, and this is going to be margin bottom, and it's going to be negative 1,500 pixels. It's going to be the same amount as the padding was positive. So I'm going to go here, put it here in the article, and I'm going to put it here in the aside as well. So now that margin bottom, which is negative, is going to pull us all the way back up. But when it does so, it's going to leave these two columns exactly the right length on the left and the right. So I'm going to reload, and now you can see they all stop at exactly the same point. So that's a little trick that a lot of people use to make all of their columns match up. You'll notice that I have a couple of pixels of white space here. That's okay. That's where my I'm going to put some borders in. So why don't we do that next? It's a good idea to plan for this too. My plan is to begin by adding a left, right, and bottom border to the wrapper. That'll give us a nice outside border. There's no need for a border at the top because it's blended in with the top of the screen. Then we have the header. I'll put a bottom border only on the header. That'll make a nice border so I don't need anything at the top of the nav, article, or aside. Then to make a border between the nav and the article and the article and the aside, I'll add a right border to the nav and a left border to the aside. And then at the bottom I'll finish up by adding a top border in the footer. So let's begin with the wrapper. I'm going to go between the margin and the padding, and I'm going to put a border here. Now this border is going to be three-sided, so I can't use the shorthand so easily here. So I'm going to begin by adding the border style, and that's going to be solid. That's going to be solid for all sides, so I'm just going to do that first. But then I need the border width. Let's see, border width. And so that's going to be 0 pixels at the top, but it's going to be 1 pixel on the right and the left, and 1 pixel on the bottom. Next, we're going to need the border color. And the border color, I'm going to make several different colors. We start at the top, so even though there is no top border, we need to make one anyway. It doesn't matter what the color is, so I'll just make it white. The next one, remember we have trouble, TRBL, so the next one is the right border. Now, I'm thinking of the lighting for my site to be at the top left. I imagine the light is coming down from the top left, so everything on the right and the bottom is going to be darker. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a darker color, not the darkest one, but a darker color. So that'll be maybe 777777. These are all going to be grays. The bottom should be the darkest, so that'll be 555555. And then we're going to come back around to the left, and I'll make that much lighter. I'll make that maybe AA, AA, AA. And so now I have my border for my wrapper, and I'm going to come back and take a look at it. And here we go. You can see it's darker on the right side, it's a little bit lighter on the left side, and it's very dark down on the bottom. You might not be able to see the difference, but there it is right there. So these are very subtle differences. Most people will never notice those different colors, but they do make a difference. Now let's give a border to the bottom of the header. So let's go to the header and have a border bottom. Now we can use the shorthand again, excuse me. So on the bottom of the header, I'm going to have 1 pixel. And we're going to do solid. And then the color will be, let's do all the interior lines as this. This is a fairly light gray color. So I can just actually copy this line. And when we go to the nav, let's put it between the padding and the margin. In the nav, I want it to be on the right, so I'll just change border bottom to border right. And it's still 1 pixel solid, BB, BB, BB. Nothing in the article, but on the aside, it's going to be on the left. I know this because I've been planning, so let's make this border left. And then for the footer, we're going to have it be at the top. So let's have it above the padding, and let's make it border top. So that should put a nice border in between all of the different parts, and there we go. See, now we've got this nice border. Now notice there's no empty space because we filled it all up with the width and the padding and the borders. And so now the page looks pretty good. Now we can compare this to what we have in the finished product, and you can see that we're getting fairly similar here. We do need to work, however, on a lot of the details, and let's work next on the fonts. So let's go get ourselves some Google Fonts. So I'm going to go to Google, and then I'm going to add fonts, and here we go. Now I've already done my research in advance. I know what fonts I want to use. I want to use Chenga, Allen, Lotto, and Railway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these all together. Now if you get different fonts at different times, you're going to have several different link tags. So you want to get all your fonts at one time. So I'm going to do this by searching. I'm going to begin by searching for Railway, and here's the one. When I have the one that I want, I just click Add to Collection, and now I have it in my collection down here. I'm going to go search for the next one, which is Lotto. And there's Lotto. Going to add that one. I know I want Chenga. So here's Chenga 1. That's the one that I want. So add that. And then finally I know Allan with A-L-L-A-N. I got a couple of them, but this one, Allan, is the one I want, so I'm going to add that. So now I've got all of my fonts down here. And so the next step is to click on Review or Use. If I click Review, I can see what I've gotten and I can see what they look like, but I know that I want them, so I'm just going to click on Use. Here I can choose what weights I want. I don't want to use the lighter ones because those don't look very good on some Windows browsers, especially on Google Chrome. But I do want some of the bold ones. I don't need the italic, I just need the bold. So I'm going to go for these guys. I probably don't need the extra bold. I'm going to stay between 400 and 700. And I don't need the italic for Chenga, but I would like the bold for Allan. So after I finished choosing my fonts, now I can just copy this link tag that they give me in number 3, and I can go back into my index file. This has to be in every single HTML file, so this index is going to be the model for the other ones. And after my style sheet, I'm going to add those there. Just paste that in. All right, you can see that it has Lotto, Railway, Chenga 1, and Allan. It has the weights that are necessary. And then from now on, if I want to, I can just use these font family declarations. All right, so I've got my fonts. I already did one of the fonts. As you recall, I added Railway to the main. So that gave me the fonts that I need for my 3 columns. But I want Lotto for my footer. So I'm going to copy and paste the font family there and just change Railway to Lotto. They're both sans serif. Then I need the ones for the H1 and the H2. So that means I have to begin making my headings. So I'm going to create some lines at the bottom here so we can get some space. There we go. And before I make my headings, I'm going to add a comment here. You make a comment in CSS by putting a /* and then a */ and everything in between is a comment, and it will not affect the code. So I'm just going to announce, here are my headings. So that's a way to keep it organized. So I'm going to say H1 gets a style, H2 is going to get a style, and H3 is going to get a style. So the style that I'm going to use is I'm going to give myself the font family. So let's do that. For the H1, I want to use Chenga 1. Don't use the plus. You might see those in the link tag, but it's not in the actual name of the font. And then for the category, Chenga 1 is probably, they say it's cursive, but if Chenga 1 does not show up, I don't want a cursive font to show up there. That could be something like Comic Sans. So I'm going to keep that as sans serif. That would be a good replacement if Chenga 1 doesn't work. For the H2, I'm going to use Allan. and I'm going to keep that sans serif as well. For H3, I'm going to use railway, and that's what I already had, so I'll just keep it that way. So now if I go ahead and save this and check what it looks like, now we can see that we're getting a little bit more of the styling here. All right, so here we can see the Chenga, the Alan, the railway, and down here we've got the Lotto over there. All right, so it's beginning to shape up a little bit. Next, I'd like to fix how this text looks, because I don't like the spacing of this. I think there's too much white space at the top and not enough at the bottom there. So I'm going to change the spacing on this a bit. Now H1, H2, and H3 all come with preset margins, but you can override those just by saying margin, and then you can put your own in here. I don't want so much space at the top of H1. I think it's something around 20 pixels. I'm going to change that to 0 pixels. I already have a margin at the top of that from the body. I'm sorry, from the wrapper. For the left and the right, I don't need anything because I've already got that in the header. But I will put some at the bottom. I don't want the H2 to be right up against the bottom of the H1. So that's my margin for the H1. For the H2, let's see, I'd like to have a margin here, but here I'd like to have no margin for the top and bottom. I think I took care of that already. But I would like to have a little bit of an inset, so I'm going to put a margin of 30 pixels for the left and the right. So that'll be a little bit more indented than the H1 will be. So let's save that and look at it, and that's closer to what I want to have. Okay. It'll be balanced by having a graphic over here. Let me compare this with what I have. There we have. Actually, I think I went for a change later on. I changed this to Chenga 1 as well, but we can see how that's going to work out. Okay, so there we go. I've got those set. I might want to work on the font size a little bit. I think I need a little bit larger fonts than what we've got here. So I'm going to go for, in H1, a font size of 32 point. And for H2, I'm going to go for a font size of, let's see, 20 point. Let's go for that. Let's see how that looks. All right, that's a little bit better. It takes care of some of the problem of some of the empty space at the bottom there. I think that's a little bit better. We've got a nice, very bold, large H1 title here, so that's very good. All right, so now we've got the top part done. So next, let's take care of the nav area. And in order to do the nav area, we need to get some divs in place. So let's do that. We're going to go into the nav, and we're going to add some things here. Now, first of all, these are going to be block anchors or block links. That means that we're not going to start with a div. We're going to start with the actual link. And I'm going to start with a link for index.html because that's going to be our first tab. And then inside of that, I'm going to put the div. So let's put the div right here. And I'm going to make this into a class. It's going to be called button. And then we're going to end that. And inside of that, we're going to put the name of the button, and we'll just begin by putting in button. We can change this later on. I think I'll call it first, next, and finally when we get to the end, but for right now this will be good. Okay, so I've got the link, and I've got the div, and I've got the text. So I just want to repeat that times 3. So I'm going to copy, paste, and paste. So now I've got 3 buttons right there. So now it's not going to look like very much. I'm going to save it and reload, and you'll see I've just got 3 links over here. Doesn't look very interesting at all. So what I need to do is I need to go into the CSS, and I need to create some button styles here. So let's go here, and I'm just gonna, there's gonna be some things in between the headings and this. This is gonna be a special one. Let me make a comment about it. So these are going to be the button styles. So marking them makes it easier to find them, not only for you, but also for me. And in the button styles, I'm going to create first a box. So I'm going to create a border. Let's see. So first we have to say class and button. And I'm going to create, let's see, a border style. And that's going to be solid. Okay, now for the rest, if we take a look at what I did finally, you'll see that the borders, I've got 3 on the top and the bottom and the left. I don't have anything on the right. This border right here is actually from this nav area. It's not on these actual buttons themselves. You'll notice I've got a white border on the top, I've got a darker one below, and I've got a medium one on the left. So they're all solid, but they need different different colors and in the different positions. They're all going to be 1 pixel, however. So let's go into border and width, and there's going to be 1 at the top, nothing on the right. There's going to be 1 on the bottom and 1 on the left. So that's what that's going to look like. Next, we're going to go with the colors. So we're going to go for border color. And we're going to choose, again, we're going to choose the sharps. We're going to begin with white. Again, the second one doesn't matter because it's invisible, but we have to put something there. So I'm going to just make that white as well. Then we have the bottom one, which is going to be the darkest one. So let's make that 555555. And then come back around for a medium colored one, which I'll put AA, like that. So those are my borders. But I also need to give them a size, and I need to position them as well. So now this is going to be different between 2 different kinds of buttons. You'll notice that one of my buttons is brighter, and there's nothing on the right here, and the other 2 are darker, and you can see the shadow and this border right here. So how did I do that? Well, I created 2 different classes, one for the current page, and then another style for the other pages. So I'm going to give those names in my styles. I'm going to say other, and I'm going to say current. So the current one will be the page that is selected at any given time. The others will be the pages that you can click on the link and go to that other page. All right, so let's give them a background color. Let's see, background color. So the background color actually for the current, I want that to be the exact same as the background color for the article. So I might want to go back up to the article and find the background color for that and just copy and paste it into the current. And then I want the one for the other to be somewhat darker than that. As a darker color, let's see about making it maybe 1 step down. Instead of FFEEDD, let's make it EEDDCC. And that'll be just a little bit darker than the current one. So that'll look like it's further back because it's shaded. All right, we want to have sizes. Now, remember, this is 180, I believe, across. Let's take a look. So our nav is about 180 across, 179 really. And I would like the buttons to be around 140. So that means I need another 39 pixels of space along the left side. So let's see how that works out. So let's go in and let's say, let's give it a width first. Now I want these widths to be different between the other and the current, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But let's make it 140 pixels. Okay, and 140 pixels right here. Whoops, sorry. Width. This is actually going to be 141, but let's make it 140 right now. I'm going to change this in just a minute. Let's see what this looks like, by the way. But first we have to go into the index, and we have to say that the button that we're on right now is the current. This is the classes, and I've made 2 classes, a button and a current. It actually looks like English, current button and other button, but this is really just applying 2 styles. All of them get the button style, but one of them gets the current style, and the others get the other style. So now when I go back to our page and I reload, you'll see that now we have something that looks like this. Well, you'll notice that there's something missing here, and that is the padding. So we need to add padding to this. So I believe all of them have a padding of about 10 pixels. So let's go in. And since both the other and the current have the same padding, I'm just going to put that in the button, because a button applies to all of them. So padding 10 pixels, and that'll be on all sides. So that should make the buttons get bigger. There we go. But now you'll see that actually I don't need 40 pixels. I need actually 40 minus 20, because I forgot we have 10 pixels here, 10 pixels here, and that leaves about 20 pixels right there. We also should have some spacing between these. Let's do that right now. On all of them, we should have a margin for the bottom, and the margin bottom should be, let's give it 5 pixels and see how that looks. And oh, that looks quite nice. So we'll use 5 pixels for that. But we need to push these over to the right. And the way to push these over to the right is to give them a different margin on the left. So I'm going to try that. And I'm going to let's give them separately. Let's make it separately. Say margin left, and let's say 20 pixels. We'll see how that looks. I'm pretty sure it's wrong. Margin left here also, 20 pixels, and we'll see what happens. All right. Well, now you see they're all attached to the main. But you see this one is attached very smoothly because it's the same color. These are not. So these have got to go actually to the left a little bit. So I'm just going to go back and I'm going to cut down the other margin left. Let's make it 19. See if that works. And 19, not enough. So we're going to go back again. It's probably because of the borders. Let's go 18, and let's see what that does. And 18 has done it. Now that we've made these have a margin of 18, that means that we've got we can see now the border here. They're not covering up the border anymore. But I have a different problem. You can see very, very slightly. I've got two pixels here actually. So maybe I shouldn't have done it by making the margin smaller. I should have made the width shorter. Let's make the margin back to 20 and change the width to 138. Bring that down by 2. And let's see what that does. This is exactly what we're looking for. So now the buttons all line up, and you can see that this one is smooth with the article area, and these are nicely cut off there so they look like they're buttons underneath. So one thing I need to do also is I need to create a text style that's a little bit better. For the button that is current, I would actually like to have a little bit more of a heavy font. So let's give it a font weight. And let's say 700. This is one of the Google fonts. So they have the 400, 500, 600, and 700 weights. I don't need to say bold. I could probably say bold, but let's just see how that looks. There we go. I probably need to do something to get rid of that underline, but I'll handle that when we get to the links. But we'll want to get rid of that underline at some point. All right, so now we seem to have the styles mostly done. Let me change the button names to what I'd like them to be. Let's have this one be first. This one will be next, and this one will be and finally. There we go. And so now we have the correct names. There we are. Okay, so now we have our tabs, but we need to create 3 pages before we can really go anywhere. They're not all going to be the index. This will be the index, this will be a next page, and this will be a finally page. So we can change the names now. We haven't made the pages yet, but we know what we're going to name them. There we go. Index, next, and finally. And so when we make those pages, next and finally, then the links should work. However, we can't do that yet because we want to finish up the styling for the whole page. Then we can make copies, and it should be easier to do that after we finished with the first page. So we want to go over here, and we want to do stuff on the right-hand side. So let's go down to the aside. This is in the HTML file, the index, and I'm going to create some space in there. And I'm going to begin by adding an image of myself. Now the source is something that some people are having trouble with in terms of the images. To explain this, let me actually show you what it looks like here. I've got my 3-column folder, which is my project folder. And if I open that up, I've got my index and my styles right here in that folder, but I've also got an images folder. And that means that my logo and the picture of me are going to be inside that. So if I just put me.jpg, that's not going to work. I have to put images and then me.jpg. So how it will look is if I type just me.jpg, that means that the image is in the same folder as the index file, but it's not. I have to go into images folder and then it'll find me.jpg. That's how it works. Now I have to give an alt text to this. I'm going to say this is me. I'm going to style this, but I don't want every image to be styled the same way. So I'm going to say that this is going to be a class. I might want to use this style again. Now I want to style this, but I've got to do a lot of CSS styling, but I don't want every image in the document to be styled this way. So instead of just doing an IMG style or rule, I'm going to create a class. And that class will be, let's say, me. This is only a picture of me. I might want to use it again, so I'm using a class, but that would probably be the best way to do it. So there we go. And I'm going to save that. If we take a look at it right now, it'll just be the picture by itself. And it'll look like this. You can see that's a little larger than I might want, and it's a square picture, so I'm going to need to style that. So I'm going to go back in to my styles, and I'm going to create down here a class for me. So I need to make a note somewhere in there to, let's see, of what I'm doing. So here is a comment right there. And I'm going to say this is a class to make a round profile image. There we go. And so now I'm going to say .me, and I'm going to make the class. All right, so in order to get this done, first I want to make sure this is displayed as a block, because usually images are in line. So if you don't make them into blocks, then the text is just going to line up to the side of the image. I want the text to be below this. So I'm going to change this to a block by saying display as block. I'm going to also set the width to something that I want, which is going to be 100 pixels. And so that is going to give me a picture that looks like this one. So this is a little bit more like what I wanted. But now I want to make it round. Now the trick is to use the border radius, but instead of just rounding the corners a little bit, you give it a giant like a 100 pixel border radius. That makes the corners curved so much that there is no edge. There is all corners. And so if we reload this, then it looks like a circle. So that's a neat little trick that you can use with the border radius. Now let's give it an actual border. Let's say the border should be 6 pixels and solid. And let's try giving it a white border, just like that, and see what happens. Now we have a nice white border right there. That worked very well. I could, of course, give it a different color if I wanted to. I might, but I could say sharp FF, 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 but white will work right now. Now let's give it a bit of a I'd like to give it actually a border outside of this. So how can I do that? Well, actually you can do that with a box shadow. So let me try that. I'm going to give it a box shadow. Let's see, box shadow. And I'm going to make this be 0 pixels to the right, 0 pixels down. But I'm going to increase the size of it. So I think this 0 pixels will be the, let's see, this should actually be 1 pixel, and then no pixels blur, and let's make it black. So what I've done basically is that I've made it be exactly in the same position as my image, but I've made the size 1 bigger. If there's 4 numbers, this is movement to the right, movement down. This is increasing the size of the shadow, so it's bigger than the circle, and then 0 pixels is a blur. So let's save it and see what happens when we reload, and that's the effect that I wanted. Have a nice little outline now around that. Now there's a trick that you may not know about, and that is that you can add a second shadow after the first one. All you need to do is after your first shadow, put a comma, a space, and then make another shadow. So let's make another one. This one will be a little bit further out. It'll be 2 pixels to the right, maybe 2 pixels down, 4 pixels blur. I'm not going to put a size on this. You can leave that out, and the computer will understand what that is. And then I'm going to put an RGBA, a semi-transparent black shadow. So I'm going to do 0, 0, 0, and then a 0.4, let's say, and that'll be a nice shadow. So we'll have 2 shadows now. The first shadow will be this one, then we have the comma, and then the second shadow will be that one. So the first shadow should appear just like this one, but now we should get an extra shadow to the bottom right, and there we go. So now we have a nice 3D effect. Looks like we've got a very thin border there. Everything is looking very, very nicely. All right, so one thing I would like to do, however, is I'd like to rotate this a bit. I look too straight up and down. I'd like to put myself at a little bit of an angle. So let's add to this. Let's go in here and add a transform. And I'm going to make it rotate. And I'm going to say how much I want it to rotate. So let's rotate it just 5. Well, let's rotate it 20 degrees so you can see it better. I'll put it down to 5 degrees probably after we're finished. Now, if I do just this, the rotation will appear in some browsers, like Firefox or Chrome perhaps, but not in Safari. If we're looking in Safari, you'll notice nothing happened. That's because some browsers don't have the newer properties here. So I'm going to have to make a couple of extra ones, and I'm going to have to add the browser engine codes. The one for WebKit is the one that I need in order for this to work for Safari. But just to be safe, just in case, I'm going to add one for let's see, for Mozilla. Sorry, that's Ponte yawning in the background. And I'm going to make one for Internet Explorer. I could make one for Opera as well, but these should do well for the time being. So now that I've got all of these different browsers covered, that's Ponte again, then I'm going to go back here, and when we look at it, boom, now I'm rotated. It's a little bit too much rotation. So I'm going to bring that, let's bring it down to 10 degrees and see how that works. We have to change all of them for all the different browsers so they can do it the same amount. Now I save it and I come back in and there we go. Now there's not too many of these codes that you need to do the WebKit, Mozilla, IE, or Opera for, but Transform is one of them. So you should add that for Transform, at the very least the WebKit. I think the other browsers might be able to handle it, but you should add them all just to be safe, just to make sure. Let me add one O for Opera, and that should now work on all the different browsers. So now I have a nice picture of myself slightly tilted, and that's a good icon almost for my web page. So let's see if we can add a little bit more to the page. First, we need a title for the section. This is the page title and the subtitle, but we need a section title. That would be H3. We've already styled it a little bit. We said it's railway. If it's a heading like H3, that means it's automatically bold. Let's put it in place and see what it looks like. This would be in the article section. So we're going to put an H3 right here. And we're going to begin with first, because that's going to be on the first page. And let's just see what that looks like. And that is what it looks like. I think it needs a little bit of work on the margins. I think it might have a little bit too much spacing, especially around the top and possibly the bottom. So let's go into the styles, and under the headings, in addition to the font family, let's reset the margins. As I said before, the H1 through 6 usually have fairly big margins, at least 20 or so points or pixels at the top and the bottom. So let's give this one a top of 8. I like to have a smaller top margin. 0 on the left and the right. And let's see what happens if we take away 6 from the bottom, making it 14 pixels. So let's see what happens there. So let's go back and reload. That looks better, and also it lines up a little bit nicer with the button here. So that actually is a nice effect as well, and I just like the spacing. And so that's a nice title for that. I think we could use the same thing over here. So let's go into the index and go to the aside. So after the image, we're going to have another H3. And this is going to be, we'll just say aside right here. I'm going to put a note here. I did this when I was making the page originally. And what I'd like to say, and first of all inside the paragraph tags, I'd like to say that the auto length columns, let's see, what I'm going to talk about is how these columns reaching the bottom all at the same time, there's certain requirements for that. So the auto column length trick only works if, then I'm going to have a list of several things. So I'm going to need an unordered list, and I'm going to need list items. I usually just fill it in with XXX first, and then I make copies of that, and now I can just easily fill in the text. So first, there has to be an enclosing block. There has to be an enclosing block around all the columns. So this was the main tag that we did before. Remember, around the nav and article, we put a main structural element, and that helped to contain all three of these in the same one section. That's necessary for this trick to work. Another point is that the footer has to be outside of that enclosing block. So the footer must be outside the enclosing block. I'm just adding text here. The third rule is that there is no min height, because that might make the trick not work. No height or min height. I guess min height is good enough here. And I think that would probably be it. Those are the requirements. So let's just make 3 of them. Take away that one. And so now, if we save it and reload it, now we have some text there. If we go up here and take a look at the finished page, you'll see that it's now getting closer and closer. So we need to do still a couple other things. First of all, let's take care of this web design logo. Let's go back to the folder and see where that is. The logo is right here. It is in the images folder. So that's going to be logo.png. So we're going to put that inside the header. So let's go ahead and place it right after the H2. That is an img tag. The source is logo.png. You have to be careful of the names here. Make sure you get them correct. The alt is going to be web design logo. And let's leave it at that right now and see what happens. If we save it, and this is the page we're working on, and reload, you can see that, ooh, I got an error. So why is it like that? Well, when you see an error like that, it's usually because you didn't put the address correct. So I think I know what I did wrong. I forgot to put the folder name. So right here, let's put images / logo.png, and I think it'll show up now. And sure enough, there it is. Now it's showing up right here because this is the H1, this is the H2. These are both block elements, and so this is appearing down below it. We don't have an overflow hidden, so this is still showing up, but we don't want it here. We want it over to the right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a style for it. So we're going to put this down here where we've got the styles down at the bottom. These are the classes or the IDs. This will probably be an ID. It's before the button styles. It's in the header. So let's make a note for here. /star. Let's see. This is an ID for the header image, and that there. And so now I'm going to say I don't need to make. Actually, no, I don't need to make an ID. This is a style for their header image. I don't need an ID because this is the only image in the header. So all I have to do is say header and img. So this is if you recall, this is a descendant selector. So that means that if the image is a descendant or a child of the header, then this will apply to it. And since there's only one image in the header, then this should be fine. So we're gonna make the position be absolute, and we're gonna say it's maybe from the top. It'll be about 10 pixels from the top, and let's make it 10 pixels from the right, and see if that works as well. So once again, what I did was that I used the position property, and I set absolute as the value. That means that this will be taken out of the normal flow, so it will ignore all the other elements. It won't pay attention to whether or not there's something there. And I want it to be 10 pixels from the top of the area and 10 pixels from the right, so it should be in the top right corner. Now this is not what I want, but I just wanted to show you what happens. So let me expand the page here. And if I reload, it'll be in the wrong place, be over here. But that's just because we said position absolute, and absolute positions begin at the top right of the whole page. I don't want that. I want it to be in the top right of this header. Now I could say, well, if I go like this, then it'll be inside the header, but many people will have pages like this or like that, and so that's not a very good move. So instead what we've got to do is we've got to trap that inside the header. The way to trap it is to make the header position relative. So if I go up here to the header, and all I have to do is say position and relative, if the position of the structural div that contains the image, if that's relative, then anything absolute inside of this will start at the top or right of this area. And so if I save this and reload, now it's inside of my header. You can see though that since I've got it going about that far from the top, it's coming down inside of the other area, but actually I kind of like that. So it's a little bit too much down. So let me try to change that. So let's see. Here we go. Maybe let's have it be 0 from the top. See what happens. We do that, and then it's going to be like that. That's okay. I like that it overlaps the main part, the 3 columns. I like that because it kind of gives it a 3D look to it, along with that drop shadow that it's got. Might want to put a little bit farther down. Let me try 3, and that looks better. But I don't want it going down so close to this picture. I want it over here. So I'm going to move it over from the right. I'm going to say 200 from the right. See what that does. That's a little bit better. That's about what I want. Let's see if this is the same as what I got last time. It's a little bit more. I think I did, what was it, 190 or something from the last one? Let's see, I did 170 actually from the last one. But you know, I like this one better, so I'm going to keep this. I might even actually want to make these go a little bit further from the left, to be quite honest. This is just striking me right now. So I'm going to say that the margin left and right for this one is going to be 30, and that the margin for this one is going to be 60. So that's the H1 and the H2. So that's the left and right margins. That's the left and the right margins. So now if I save this, then these two, the 3-column layout and the It's a Real Blast, should move to the right. And that's what they did. Yeah, that looks better. That looks more balanced to me. Okay, so now we've got our header image. That's how you might do it. Next, let's put in some shadows here, the fancy shadows on the H1 and the H2. So I know I'm not going to use the H1 and the H2 again outside of the headings, so I can change these without having to worry about it showing up somewhere else. We're going to begin by taking a color for the text. We're going to make it light orange. Let's say FFBB66, and that should make it a nice light orange color. That's pretty much what I want. I don't want it to be too dark because I want the red shadow to show up in good contrast against it. If I make the color too deep or too dark, then the red will just blur and blend in. I want to make a text shadow now. So here we go, make a text shadow. And the first one will be very close, and it'll be 1 pixel, 1 pixel, and 1 pixel. That's 1 pixel to the right, 1 pixel down, and 1 pixel blur. And then we'll put in a color, FF0000, and that'll be red. Now if we just look at this, then we'll see just a very small red shadow. That's not bad, but we want to make it look a lot nicer. So we're going to make another shadow just a little bit farther away. Now, as you recall, to make a second or third shadow, you just add a comma and then another shadow. But instead of doing it all in one line, it might be more clear if I say enter, then, whoops, not that, tab, tab, tab. Let me do a space out here, and now we're ready to go. Now we're right underneath the first one, and I can just say 2 pixels to the right, 2 pixels down. The blur is still going to be 1 pixel, and the color is going to be a little bit lighter, from F to E to D, so 2 steps down. FF is 15, DD is 13, so we're going 2 steps down. Otherwise, it wouldn't change color enough. Okay, so now I can just copy and paste this several times. And now I can just change the numbers by going up and down. So this is 3, 4, 5, and 6. This also is 3, 4, 4, 5, and 6. So now these shadows are getting slightly further away to the right and down. The blur stays the same. We blur it so that it doesn't look too sharp. And then the color should get slightly and slightly and slightly darker. So 15 is F, D is 13, so let's put in B for 11, then 9, and then 7, and then 5. So this will get darker and darker and darker red. With the last one, we want to do that. We want to put in a semicolon. And so now if we save it and go back, then you'll be able to see the full one. So you can see that each individual shadow that we put in added a little bit more to it. I can show you this by getting rid of some of them. Let me just temporarily take away 3 lines and go like that. So now this is just the 1, 2, 3. And if I go up here, it looks like that. So by adding more and more lines slightly and slightly and slightly further away with deeper and deeper colors, we can make that nice shadow there. All right, so let's try now for the H2. This time we're going to start with a color of white and just make it, I'll just make it white there. And then for the text shadow, we're going to do a very similar thing, but this time we're going to start with a black outline. You'll notice that the background here is white, and so if we make the text white, it doesn't appear. So we need an outline. Now a way to do that is to give it a larger blur. So we're going to make this first text shadow be exactly behind the text, 0 pixels to the right, 0 pixels down, but we're going to give it a bigger blur. We're going to give it a 2-pixel blur, and we're going to make the color black. Now I'm going to use RGBA because we're going to be getting less and less solid. We're going to get more transparent. So I'm going to do this with 0, 0, 0, and then I'm going to say 1. This will be just completely black. And I'm just going to end it there, and we'll see what effect that has. So once again, 0, 0 for having it be exactly behind the text, 2 pixels blur, and a black shadow with no transparency. So let's save that, and let's reload it. And now you can see that that actually looks kind of neat, but we're going to try for an even better effect. So let's now continue that shadow. Instead of a semicolon, let's put a comma, go to the next line, and tab, tab, tab until we get up here. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it farther and farther away. And we're going to make it be more and more transparent as we go. So I'm going to try bigger jumps this time. I'm going to try, let's go away 3 pixels to the right, but only 1 pixel down. It's not going to be exactly at a 45-degree angle. We're going to have it be, let's keep it at 2 pixels blur, but this time we're going to make it a lot lighter, RGB A, and then 0, 0, 0, and let's make it really light this time. Let's make it 0.1, let's say 1.5, and see how that works. And then we're going to repeat that. So I'm going to copy and paste several times. And we're going to go by steps of 3 for the right and the left. So this one will be 6 pixels away, then 9 pixels, then 12, then 15, 18, 21, and 24. Let's see how that works. This one will be just going down one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They'll all be blurred by 2. And let's go down by steps of 2 here. Let's try 13 and 11. And let's try 0.9 here, and 0.7, 0.5, 0.3, and 0.1. And let's see what happens with that. Let's put a semicolon here so that we can stop it. So this should go away more to the right, little bit down, be kind of blurry, and is going to be mostly transparent. You can see these are very transparent values. 1 is wholly black. 0.1 is already pretty transparent. So let's see what happens when we do that. And let's reload, and there is the effect that we get. That actually is a pretty neat effect. Now, if you want to have a stronger black outline, then what you can do is you can just repeat that first shadow. You can put multiple shadows of the same type, and it might, I believe, actually give us a little bit darker shadow there. So what I did was I just copied and pasted, so now we have 2 of the same shadow at the beginning, and I believe that'll give us an even stronger outline. Let's see what happens, and if I reload, there we go. Yeah, that's a darker outline right there. So that actually works pretty well. However, I'm beginning to think that this text is really wide, this text is pretty narrow. So I'm just going to do what I did on the other page, and I'm going to change this one from the Alan font into the Chenga 1 font. So I'm just going to copy this line right here, and I'm going to paste over that line right there. But everything else is going to stay the same. Let's see what happens when I do that. And so now we get a little bit, yeah, that's a little bit better, I think. So there we go. So now if we go back between these two pages, you'll see that things are beginning to look a lot more similar. One thing that we need to do visually is change these buttons right here. Make sure that they have the right color. So probably after the header image, but before the button styles. And we're going to make another note to ourselves, another comment, and we're going to say links. We can keep it that simple. I think that's pretty clear. And then we're going to create the link styles. So we're going to begin with a simple nav A, and that'll affect all of the links inside of the nav area. So I'm going to start with text decoration. This is a very common move. Give it no text decoration. That gets rid of the underline. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to see if it works. And reload. There we go. But the colors are not good. They don't match the colors around here. So I'm going to make it more of an orange or brown. I might want to even change the green over here at some point, but for right now it's okay. These are strange colors. I didn't pay careful attention to exactly what colors we're using. I just wanted colors that would show you the different sections more clearly. So let's make it a color that is closer to the color of the background. So let's say color, and we're going to make that, let's see, sharp DD6600. That's going to be also a kind of a darker orange. So let's see what happens when we do that. There we go. So those are the colors. But we want to hover so that when we hover over any of these, that they change color. So we're going to have a, let's try this. Let's try nav and A. And let's see. Let's try nav A and then hover and see what happens. Okay, so this one is just, we're going to change this to kind of a dark red. We'll say color and then give it a maybe BB0000 and save that. And let's see what happens when we do that. So here we go. Reload, and now when we move over it, actually, that looks pretty nice. This is actually different than what I had on the other page, but I like this better. Okay, so now you can see we're getting much closer to what we have on that page that I made before. And so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to now make these other pages. We have the links to these pages, but it's really just pages that don't exist. As you recall, if we go into the index here, in my nav section, I made the first, next, and finally links, and I called them index, which is this page, next, and finally. Now this is what you'll be doing when you create a page style that you want to repeat. You're just going to take that first page, the index, and you're going to make duplicates of it, and then you're going to change the content for that page. So this is actually the easier part. So we're going to go to the index where the files are. We're going to copy that and we're going to paste that, and I'm going to make two copies. One copy I'm going to call next. That's going to be the second page. Then the other one we're going to call finally, and that's going to be the third page. So here we have the first page, the index, then we have the next page, or page 2, and then we have finally, which is page 3. So those are the addresses that we made for these links. But right now they're all just the same page. I just duplicated them. I copied and pasted them. So we're going to want to take the two new pages that we made, and we're going to change the content. So I'm going to bring them in here. I'm not going to change the content too much, but one way we can do it is that we can get rid of many of these lorem ipsum paragraphs. So we have 10 paragraphs. Let's get rid of the first 4. There we go. So you can see that the first paragraph now is the 5th paragraph, and it starts differently. So that's a nice contrast. Also, I'm going to change this from first into next. So this is the next.html. Now I'm going to go to finally, and in finally, I'm going to change this to finally. And then I'll just get rid of 2 paragraphs here, there and there. And so now they're all different lengths and they look like they have different text. I can actually go for the links now, and I can click here and say next and finally, and you can see that I'm moving from page to page. If we take a look at the browser, well, you can't see the address unfortunately, but this goes to next. You can just barely see it there, and this goes to finally. But you'll notice that something that's not happening right is that these buttons don't change. When we click on next, then this middle button should be the lighter color and it should be joining the page. When we click on finally, then that should be joining the page. So the way to do that is to go into the links for each page. Now you'll notice that on each of these pages we have the classes for the divs: current button, other button, and other button. The current button has a lighter color, and it's the one that seems attached to the article section. So all that we need to do is on the next page, just make sure that next is the current button, and then change the index to the other button. You can see this in the sample Ponta pages, the Shiva pages I made on the site, but this is how we do it. So I'm going to go in now to finally, and I'm going to do the same thing here, except now and finally is the current button, and the index is the other button. So just by doing that and saving it, we're able now to go here and say next and finally, and you can see that each one appears now to take the appearance of the tabbed button. So that's kind of nice. Notice, by the way, that you can get the link by moving the cursor anywhere over the div. That's what the block anchor is. Instead of only having the text be a link, now the entire div is a link. Let's add one small extra flourish. Let's make it so that when we click on the next and the finally, or the other buttons, let's make them flash white when we click on them. So let's go to the styles. And we're going to go now to the button styles, and we're going to go to where it says other. And we're going to make, let's see, make it other. And we're going to make a pseudo class where we're going to say other active. And so now we're just going to change the background color. And we're going to make it a very light orange, not exactly white, but let's make it sharp. And then let's make it FF, F7, and F0. That should make it a very light orange. And now that we've done that, let's save it. And so now when we reload, whenever you click on the next, you see it flashes before it goes. See, there we go. So if you hold down, you can see the flash. That's the active pseudo class, and that's it. All right, so there we go. There's our page. Now, the next thing that we want to think about is, what does this look like when it prints out? And the fact is that it's not going to look very good. So you can see here, for example, that here's my printout. It goes down 2 pages. We've got all these colors. We've got all this stuff that's really not necessary for a printout. Now, take, for example, the buttons on the side. Do we need to print the buttons? No. When somebody prints this page, they're going for the content. They want to print all of this text, which is here. They don't want to print the buttons or the pictures or anything like that. So it's a good idea to make it so that your web page prints out best for saving the information, not necessarily being the nicest colorful design, because a lot of people are going to print out in black and white. So they don't really need the buttons and the things that really don't help them out. So we're going to do that by actually creating an extra style sheet. And this is how we do it. Now we're going to have to change all of the different files for this. I probably should have done this before we created the other pages, but I wanted to do this step last. So let's create a link, And this is also going to be a rel equals style sheet. But it's going to have a different name. It's going to have the name print. We're going to make a completely different style sheet that's just for printing. But we need to add one other thing, because right now, it's following both of these. We have to make it so that it files one of these for when we're looking on a web browser, but we want the print only to apply when we're printing. So in order to do that, we go here and we say media equals and print. And there we go. Now, in order to make it clear, we should take the first one and say media equals, and then this should be screen, like that. So that means that whenever you're looking on a web browser, the screen will be used as a style sheet. But whenever you're printing out, the print will be used as a style sheet. So I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to copy. I'm going to go to the next page and I'm going to replace that link with these two right there. So now we have both here. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the finally page. Going to replace that. So now we have the styles and the print, the screen and the print for both, for all three actually, of those files. So now we need to make an alternate style sheet. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to save as, and I'm going to save it here in our 3-column thing, but I'm going to call it print. Remember, that's what we called it in the link. We called it print.css. So there we go. And so once again, we have the styles.css and the print.css, just like that. So now the print.css is going to be a lot different from the styles. So for example, the nav section, we don't even need that anymore. So we're going to get rid of all this, and we're just going to say for the nav section, we just want to have it say display none. So that makes it disappear. So now that's not even there. We're actually going to say that the wrapper is going to have a width of 100%. So that means it'll probably print better. We're also going to say that the article is going to have a width of 100%. Now, this is because the aside is going to be kind of tricky. Different browsers will print different widths. So if we try to make a sidebar, for the aside, that's going to look really bad on some printers. So instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to say that this doesn't float right. It doesn't float at all, as a matter of fact. We're going to take away the float from the aside, and we're going to take away the float from the article. So now they'll appear one on top of each other. So we can also take away things like background colors, because we don't want to print really in color. So we're going to do that as well right over here. And just the changes that we've made right now. Let's see what happens when we print. When we try to print this page, I'm going to reload. I'm going to try to print this page. And here you can see that now we're printing out mostly just the text. And when we get to the bottom, the aside is down here. Now, the picture of me is really cute, but it's not really necessary. So I'm going to get rid of that. This web design image is getting in the way, so we're going to get rid of that as well. So what we're going to do is go to the header image, and instead of all this stuff, we're going to say again, display none. And then before you start panicking, we're in the print CSS. We still have the styles.css, which is a normal one. So the web page looks fine. This is just for printing. So we just took away the header image. And now we want to take away that round image of me. Let's see. So why don't we do that again? We can do this more easily. We have a display there already. So we're just going to say display none. There we go. So now that should clean up those images. Notice that we still got a nice looking web page on our screen, but when we print, now the printing is looking more and more and more clean. There we go. However, I noticed, for example, that it looks like some of the printing is getting cut off here. So I'm actually going to cut that down from 100% to about 90%. So that would be the article. So instead of 100%, let's make that 90%. Let's do the same thing for the aside. And for the aside, we should have this be 90%. There we go. Actually, the width should be 90% instead of the pixels. And so let's see what happens here. Let's reload again. Let's print. All right, this is actually looking very nice now. So now on the print, we can see that all of this text appears like that. We go over here. Oh, the aside looks beautiful there now. All right, so now it's really looking a lot nicer. We don't need the footer, perhaps. Well, actually, the footer looks okay. But this blue stuff, do you remember what this blue stuff is down here? That was my background color for the body. So all I have to do is get rid of that. And now it should be pretty much perfect. So let's try printing out. Here we have the first page, and then we have the second page. No blue down there. Actually, the shadows for the titles look really nice, but when you're printing, again, not really necessary. So let's get rid of those. Let's make the colors black so that they're more visible in a print. Let's do 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Again, let's get rid of that. And 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so now, when we print, we should get a nice all black and white. There we go. That's pretty much perfect. I could, if I wanted to, get rid of these borders. They're really not necessary, but they don't get in the way so much. That works out okay. Probably it would be better just to get rid of that, that left border, but I think we're fine. So that's how you make a print CSS file. So I'm going to go over here and we're going to take a look at what we've got. So we've got the images folder, we've got the index, the next, and the finally pages. We've got the styles for the screen, and we've got the styles for print. And so now the website is pretty much complete. So this has been quite a long practice. It's taken me all day to make this. If you go through the video and you take a look at what my clock is, you'll see that I've been doing this all day long. But in any case, that is how you make a 3-column design. Along the way, I've shown you some nice other special effects, how to make a nice round image there, how to make the tabbed buttons for the nav section, how to make some really cool special effects for the text shadows, how to add images with absolute positioning that go exactly where you want them to go, how to add nice fonts, how to make your columns go up and down and follow each other all the way down to the bottom. There's a lot more we can do, but I think you're tired. I certainly am. I've got other work to do. So let's stop right there. So this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to make a page just like this for your next exercise. You might think, wow, this is going to be a big job. It's going to take a lot of time, but this is very similar to what you're going to be doing for your project number 3. Now, please, again, don't just copy what I've done for your project number 3. You want to make your own design. You might want to have 2 columns or 3 columns. You might want to have your nav bar be at top instead of at the on the side like that. For example, if we go to lcjcampus, lcjcamp.us/Shiba, you can see those samples that I made. Here we have a very similar one. This is a 2-column design, but I've got the tabs at the top instead of at the sides. I show you some alternate versions where instead of tabs, we've got these little buttons that look like this. There's a wooden version over here that in which the buttons are slightly animated. So all of these are possibilities for your project number 3. That's something that you can practice by making this exercise just the way that I've shown you right here. All right, so thank you very much. Have yourselves a good evening, because it's probably nighttime by now, and I'll see you in class. Bye-bye.